So he could speak 1,000 words, and I could show you one photograph. He could speak 1,000 more words, and I can show you that video. And what it does is it puts the lie to this theory about some kind of murderous rage. But we don't just stop there. We didn't just stop there, because this is serious business. A man's life is at stake. So what do? We talk to Gigi Guerin, who's his housekeeper. O.J. Simpson, by and large, has a great relationship with all the women in his life. And you've met a number of them. Gigi Guerin is the housekeeper. So she came in here, and the great witness said that she was at Knott's Berry Farm on June 12th. She's out with her family. And at 8 o'clock, she wanted to stay over because she's due to come home that evening. She said, "Can I stay over?" And Mr. Simpson says, "Yes, you may." And so I asked her, "How did he sound to you?" Sounded like Mr. O.J. Simpson always sounds. The employer that she knows, the relationship that she has with him. You saw her. You observed her. You saw her go through cross-examination. She seemed believable to you? 8 o'clock? I think so. I think you'll find so. Then we know that at 9 o'clock, he talked to Christian Reichardt, his friend, Dr. Christian Reichardt. And you saw Chris Reichardt come in here and talk to you. I thought he made a very, very, very good witness from a standpoint of what he had to say. He told you that O.J. Simpson sounded even happier than usual. He's more jovial. He got his life back together, and he was moving on. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting way of looking at circumstantial evidence? Let me show you how we differ in this case. The doctor witness comes in and says O.J. Simpson is jovial at 9 o'clock on June 12th. Pretty good evidence, wouldn't you say? I think you'd love to have that. Anybody would in the case where you're supposedly in a murderous rage. Instead of Chris Darden standing here and saying, "Well, you know, that's pretty tough evidence for us to overcome," he says O.J. Simpson was happy because he was going to kill his wife. Now, if you believe that, I suppose I might as well sit down now, and I'm probably wasting my time. I don't think any of you believe that. That is preposterous. It flies in the face of everything that is reasonable. If you have these two reasonable hypotheses, his isn't even reasonable, but extremely reasonable. You'd have to adopt this, that he's jovial, he's happy. They make a date for that next Wednesday when O.J. Simpson returns from back east. You remember that? That's the testimony. Now, Mr. Darden tries to make a big thing of the fact, well, gee, you know, golly, was he depressed about the fact that they had broken up or they finally broken up? He said, yeah, he'd been down. I don't think he never said he was depressed, that he was down or upset. And who wouldn't be? Remember the last questions I asked? If you had just ended a 17-year relationship, it was over, you feel down. For a short period of time, you got your life on. You wouldn't go kill your ex-wife, the mother of your children. O.J. Simpson didn't try to kill or didn't kill Nicole Brown Simpson when they got a divorce, when they went through whatever settlement they went through, when Faye Resnick moved in, when any of these things, none of these things happened. Because of their rush to judgment, they have to try to come up with some kind of a motive. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't stop with just Christian Reichardt and what he had to say. And of course I have his testimony also about what he said. He talked about the demeanor of the various people he talked about, but most importantly he talked about O.J. Simpson's demeanor and how it was that night and how he appeared to be. Let me just read you this part here. This is 42537, Counsel. Question. Now, with regard to the statement about whether or not you talked about Miss Nicole Brown Simpson, that was not the thrust of any of that conversation, was it? Answer, not at all. She wasn't on his mind. This time he's talking about getting ready to go to McDonald's. In fact, do you recall that Mr. Simpson had said that to you, that he was out of the loop, that he was glad to be out of the loop, that he'd gotten his life together with his new lady? Remember him telling you that? Answer, that's correct. And who was that new lady? Answer, Paula Barbieri. Let me just take a moment about Paula Barbieri. One of the most outrageous things heard yesterday was this wild speculation that O.J. Simpson had some kind of falling out with Paula Barbieri on that Sunday. Where is the evidence of that? I mean, that's preposterous. The evidence is quite to the contrary. Remember when O.J. Simpson came back into town on Friday? First person who met him and they spent the evening together was Paula Barbieri. And it was interesting because I was having trouble hearing her. She said, I stayed at the house till one of you reminded me, she said, till I went to the prayer meeting. That's where she left. They'd been together that day. And then, on the very next day, they went to this dinner in support of Israel. And I guess Mr. Douglas can show us that. This is that dinner. I guess he's really working up that murderous rage that day with those little ladies that he's with. They seem to be really happy to be taking a picture with him. Had no idea we'd ever have to use this to show, to counterbalance this specious, cynical, speculative theory that he's had some kind of a time fuse. But that photograph, again, demonstrates that. And then we have the testimony of the lady who was there, Carol Connor, about what she called that exquisite moment. And I suppose that she's an artist. You can tell by the way she was dressed when she's here, and she's written this Academy Award-winning love tune. And I guess she sees things maybe that we don't quite see. But she said it was an exquisite moment between O.J. Simpson and Paula Barbieri as they were in each other's arms at that particular dinner. Remember, she told you that. Was he thinking about Nicole at that point? Only in Chris Darden's mind. Not in yours, not anything else reasonable. And so you have, again, these photographs and these word pictures, which I think amply destroys this. So he continues on about Paula Barbieri. He says, you knew about Paula Barbieri, isn't that correct? Yes, I did. Also, Mr. Simpson had told you that he began dating Paula Barbieri on a regular basis, isn't that correct? Answer, yeah. And that you had said and indicated to the police in an interview that Mr. Simpson seemed to like Paula a lot and seemed happy, or at least happier, than he had been before once he was with Paula. Isn't that correct? That's correct, yes. That's what you told the police, isn't it, sir? That's correct. When you talked to the police, Dr. Reichard, were you telling them the truth? Answer, absolutely. And when you are coming here today to testify to this jury, are you telling them the truth? Answer, absolutely. And so, once again, I haven't tried to speculate. I've read to you what the witness said. Now what about this thing that Darden keeps talking about that he knows isn't so, that the police have been out there 8 times on so-called domestic discord cases. They told you that a whole bunch of times. And this is why you have to look with some suspicion at what the prosecutors tell you in this case. You remember Officer Farrell? The officer who was a sergeant, I believe, who after the '89 incident went back to the station to try and check and see whether or not there had ever been any other incidents where any of the police officers in that division in West Los Angeles had been called. You check your notes. And so what he did was he had occasion to check for other domestic discord incidents. This becomes rather important later, as you're going to see. So he talks to us. He says, the question is, all right, so you talked to some officers. How many? Just tell me in number, how many officers did you talk to altogether? Answer, I can't recall. Maybe 10. And did you take any reports from any of those officers? Answer, I requested, if they had any information, to write out a report and give it to me. Question, and you got a report from one officer, did you not? Answer, that's correct. Question, and that officer's name is Mark Furman. Question, that's correct. And was that the only written report that you received? So now, when Darden stands up here and talks to you about these 8 incidents or whatever where there's nothing happened, they checked with at least 10 of the police officers in that division. Nobody had any recollection of anything of going out there. Now, we know from Ship, the police would stop by there. We know that. Ship told us that. There's some photograph and evidence of O.J. Simpson with Ship and maybe some other police officers. That was a place they would stop by on occasion. But this, to tell you 8 to 10 times, they know that was their own witness, Farrell. Then he has the audacity to tell you about stalking. He tells you in opening statement, He's going to tell you and show you O.J. Simpson was stalking Nicole Brown Simpson. Now, this is the prosecutor. He proved one incident of stalking? Absolutely not. In fact, yesterday, when he stood up here and told you about O.J. Simpson looking in the window of Nicole Brown Simpson's house, I was somewhat dismayed. So, I thought, gee, I better get the transcript out again, since the record is the best evidence, not what they say. Because they say it so, isn't so. They said that themselves. And so we talked about this, and you remember Mr. Colby and Co., two people who lived next door to Nicole on Gretna Green. Remember them? You remember those two. And Mr. Colby was testifying on this date. It's 13176. I saw him observe the residence next door, then walk around the corner, which would be southerly, then westerly on Shetland, and go back around again and look again at the residence. Well, let me just stop you there, all right, so that it is clear. When you first saw the man who was on the sidewalk 5 feet from Nicole Brown's driveway, there's an objection. Yes, then he walked in a southerly direction, then back around the corner. Our house is on a corner like this, indicating. He then went southerly and then westerly and then back around again. Okay. Did he walk back to the same spot he was in when you saw him initially? Yes, he did. And he goes on to talk about him walking within 5 yards of Nicole Brown Simpson's driveway and then walks back. And you remember this was the incident where Mr. Colby said he was embarrassed because he saw this black man in Brentwood and he called the police. And then he found out it was O.J. Simpson. Now, nowhere are you going to find in that testimony O.J. Simpson was up looking in a window or stalking anybody. He was on the sidewalk out there, presumably waiting for his wife or the kids to come home, and then he left. That's how the people have twisted and turned things in this case. That becomes his incident of stalking. And when you go back, you look at this evidence, and I know you're going to be fair and honorable, you look at this and you'll see. You'll make short work of this. You'll make short work of an emotional argument. It was very emotional. But it doesn't add up. It doesn't fit. It wasn't factual. It's for a limited purpose. And here may be the coup de grace. All of these things are supposedly for motive, to show how somebody might have acted on June 12th. Interesting, isn't it? Again, in the words of Shakespeare, they're hoisted by their own petard. They talk about these incidents involving Nicole and Mr. O.J. Simpson. Every time they would have an argument, everybody would know about it, whether it was in '89 or the '93. Everybody would know about it because it would be loud. They'd be arguing back and forth. There was drinking on the time in '89, January 1st. Remember what the evidence was? They'd both been drinking. Certainly doesn't make it right, but they were loud arguments where everybody knew about it. What kind of characteristic is that in this case? This is a case about stealth. This is a case about somebody who, it seems to me, is a professional assassin who kills these two people. And the thing that is so outrageous, for them to stand here and tell you that this is all about Nicole Brown Simpson. Have any of you thought during the last year, what if the perpetrators were after Ron Goldman and that envelope that he had in his hand, that Dr. Lee found that smear on? Who in this courtroom would know? The rest is speculation. This is their theory that they tried to come up with. We don't know. This is a case of reasonable doubt. This is a case of an innocent man wrongfully accused. They can't answer those questions. No one can under these circumstances. And so we move on and look at other things that don't fit. We know that there was this terrific struggle involving primarily Mr. Goldman as he fought for his life. Why no bruises on Mr. Simpson's body here? Admittedly, this was a violent struggle involving two very, very fit adults. And let's look briefly at the bruises on Mr. Goldman's hands. I don't think we have to cut the feet on this, Your Honor, I don't believe. Remember we talked about this in opening statement. That large bruise on the knuckle, according to Dr. Baden and others, is consistent with Mr. Goldman's fight that he put up for his life. He struck something, probably a person at that point. But Miss Clark and the others can't even admit that. In the face of doctors, a doctor who did the autopsy, re-examination of the death involving Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy, tells you one thing. The prosecutor say, oh, no, he must have been flailing back, must have hit his hand against a tree or something like that. Only the facts that they want to put into this little contorted theory. But we prove to you otherwise. We prove to you what's reasonable under the circumstances. So I think you saw that in my opening, and I think that is further evidence this was a very, very real fight. And of course, in a real fight, in real life, fights are awkward and clumsy. Oftentimes the combatants are rolling around the ground. And one of the very interesting things in this case is this dugout area near Mr. Goldman's body. The feed should be cut. This area I thought was very, very interesting. Remember, I asked Detective Lang about this, and this is going to become very, very important later on. See this area, this dugout area? Remember, there's the pager over there, and there's this dugout area. That gives you some idea of the ferocity of this altercation that took place. Remember, Dr. Henry Lee talked about the blood all around in this area, the keys one place, the beeper someplace else. This dugout area. Interesting, isn't it? Now, think with me for a moment. If you fought for 5 to 15 minutes in an area like that, I suppose both parties would have a lot of bruises and marks on them, wouldn't they? Mr. Goldman did, and I bet you his perpetrator does. But there's something else again. They want to tell you, and you'll hear a lot about socks before we're finished, that these socks that all of a sudden appear for that video at the foot of his bed were being worn by Mr. O.J. Simpson. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when you see these socks, what do you think the dirt and dust was on these socks? Now let's see if they can ever explain this. Where was the dirt that was thrown up and moved around on these socks? You're not going to see any. You're not going to see any dirt because those socks weren't there. You see that dirt? You see that dugout? You remember this photograph. What number is this, Mr. Douglas?
83, Your Honor.
You remember this when you talk about this case and you wonder whether or not there's a reasonable doubt, whether or not this is an innocent man wrongfully accused. And so you look at this. When you expect, common sense would tell you there'd be bruises and nicks, being kicked, there'd be marks on all the perpetrators. With the heavy foliage there, with the fence and the trees, you would expect scratches on everyone. Whereas Mr. Goldman has more than 30 stab wounds, you would expect this struggle, 5 to 15 minutes, to have left that. But there's nothing like that in this case. Nothing like that on Mr. Simpson's body. And you've seen that before and you'll see it again. Now, in this case,
Exhibit 1249, Your Honor. Thank you.
in this case, in the opening statement I showed you, with Bob Shapiro's foresight and wisdom, he had these photographs taken, I think on June 15th. Instead of praising this lawyer who was interested in the truth, the prosecution says, well, they went to Dr. Heisinger. That wasn't really his doctor. Isn't that preposterous? Dr. Heisinger, by all accounts, is a qualified doctor. He was the Raiders team doctor. So I suppose he's qualified. And this is Mr. O.J. Simpson's body as it appeared on June 15th. Would you expect to see a lot of bruises and marks on that body? See his back? Some of these aren't very flattering, but this is not about flattery. This is about his life. Now on his hands, there's some slight abrasions on his hands, but nothing consistent with a fight like this. You know it, I know it, we all know it. And we'll talk more about this so-called fishhook cut and where he got that. It'll become very clear when we talk about demeanor, where that came from. Mr. Clark wants to try to confuse that, but that's very, very clear. And so with regard to Mr. Simpson's physical condition, I want to just tell you to take my word, to stand there and say, oh, he was in great shape on that day, or he looked good, or whatever. Fortunately, we had photographs again. We had graphic evidence of this man's body. This man had not been in a life and death struggle from 5 to 15 minutes. Ms. Clark herself said it. She used a boxing analogy, saying that a boxer's fight for 3 minutes per round. Sometimes it's a knockout in the first round, but in this instance, we know because of the way the injuries were and the blood, this lasted for this period of time. This was a violent struggle. That man that you saw up there was not involved in that violent struggle. And so we did call, Bob Shapiro called Dr. Robert Heisinger as a witness in this case, and you recall that Dr. Heisinger was a very, seemed to me a very credible, honest witness. What did he say? He said that O.J. Simpson looks like Tarzan, but he moves more like Tarzan's grandfather. That's not to say that O.J. Simpson wouldn't be capable of committing a crime. It's never what we were trying to say. What we were trying to say was that see this man for who he is. See this man for the arthritis that he suffers. That everybody in his family suffers with arthritis. You saw his mother, you heard his sister, and you heard he has it worse than they have. Now he can still play golf. You can still do that. And some of you, I hope, don't. But if you have in the early stages, you know what it is. Certainly on certain days. What I think it means is you don't go out looking for anybody to be in an altercation with. O.J. Simpson, by all accounts, has trouble with lateral movement, from moving from side to side, because you saw when I had him come over here, those knee operations that basically spelled NFL, National Football League, 4 or 5 times on the left knee, maybe a couple times on the right knee. That's the price that a running back plays. And while I'm talking about running backs, wasn't it interesting yesterday that Ms. Clark in our argument says O.J. Simpson was a football player, and he has to run through the line, and he has the killer instinct. Is that really stretching it, ladies and gentlemen? O.J. Simpson hasn't played football for 15 years. Man's 46 years old now. He's not going to run with anything anymore. But she doesn't know much about sports, does she? Because a running back avoids trying to be hit. That's what he does. The problem with them, they don't block. They always run. They try to get out of the way. So he's not looking for contact. He gets tackled. But running backs don't try to run over anybody, only like maybe Jim Brown or somebody like that. The rest of them run out of bounds. So, I mean, they grab at everything. Killer instinct. Played football 15 years ago, and he was the best at what he did. He won the Heisman Trophy, according to his daughter, the day she was born. Emblematic of the best football player in America. And so, this was brought to you only to give you some further factors about who this man is, what limitations, if any, he has, to give you a complete picture of who he is. Now we shift our attention to Mr. O.J. Simpson's demeanor, and I want you to examine with me the conduct both before and after June 12th, 1994, and the manner in which this man reacted and handled himself. You'll remember, and let's start off with the week before. We could have gone further back. You know from the evidence that he travels all the time. He hardly has any time to have any fuse for anything. He's never here. He's always traveling for Hertz. He's doing something with sports. He's not here. This particular week was typical of the kind of weeks he has, it seems. He was here on Monday. On Tuesday, he and Paula Barbieri got together and met with this interior designer who'd done work on his house before. She brought out that he's done other work on that house, to change the bathroom around and do some other work. She had a budget, and they gave her a check. Now, it's so interesting, isn't it? You change your house or get some work done. Mr. Darden says that's to get Nicole out of the house. Is that stupid? I mean, does that make any sense to you? That's preposterous. Man's moved on with his life. He's having some work done, some interior decorating work done. We prove that. can't see the positive side of that. O.J. Simpson, a check for Collins & Collins, was Mary Collins. June 7th, $1,000. That was a down payment on the work she was going to do. Again, you saw her. You saw her come in. This work was to be done. They wanted to do it, and Paula Barberi played a role and a great part in that work. After that, he was on the road. Went back east to play golf with Jack McKay. And you saw Jack McKay, and you remember they were golf buddies. It was a Hertz thing, or not a Hertz thing. This was this association of retired or something or other. Played golf. But the most important thing I thought was Mr. McKay indicated that, and there was the foursome, Mr. McKay indicated that he observed Mr. Simpson walking, and walking with a limp. You'll recall that. And then we came to the Carol Connor dinner, where Carol Connor observed the magic moment on this Saturday. And then we called witnesses from the family. Now, any daughter would be proud and want to testify for her father. But you saw her on the stand. You got a chance to judge her like you do the other witnesses, to observe her credibility and what she had to tell you. She told you that her father always rushed around. Told you something about him, too. And when she got out of college at Howard University, she wanted to come home. He had a place for her to come home to. You know, children go away and they come back a lot these days. And so, Cato Kalin, they make a big thing about Cato Kalin living there. You know, I choose to think, says something about O.J. Simpson. You don't know Cato Kalin anything. If he wanted to say, look, I don't want you living with my wife, we're trying to get back together. I suppose a guy could say that if they're trying to get back together. He didn't say that. Let him come and live there in the other guest house. They turned that around to something bad. That's something positive about this man who with such dignity has sat there for all these months. This human being, this Orenthal James Simpson. That tells you something about him. And so his daughter tells you a lot about him. She can tell a lot about a person, I suppose, by their children. She tells you a lot about him and their living together and their life together and what he meant. About how our little brothers and sisters would come over there in the early morning hours after they were trying to get together in 1994 in May. They'd be out by the pool. She'd see him. About the kind of life they had together and the dogs that they purchased and the kind of things they did. Maybe a little bit of the other side of what these incidents they want to talk about in the distant past. The way O.J. Simpson really is and really was. You saw her and you observed her. And she told you how her father reacted when he got the news that his ex-wife had been killed. She told you she had never before heard her father sound like that. How upset he was. How he lost control of himself. How distraught he was. You heard her. You saw her on that stand. That's why we called her. So you'd have a better understanding, because I knew there'd come a day that Marcia Clark would stand here and say, well, you know, he didn't react like somebody does when they get this information. Just like she did yesterday. But what Miss Clark forgot, because I examined Detective Phillips, and you look back through your notes, the first thing that O.J. Simpson said to Detective Phillips was, what do you mean she's been killed? And then he kept repeating himself, and Phillips, to his credit, said he became very, very upset, kept repeating himself, and Phillips gave the phone to Arnell Simpson. So she can again theorize, fantasize all she wants. Well, he didn't ask if it was a car accident. You ever had some bad news given to you? There's no book that you go to. The only book you should go to is the Bible or your God, whomever you believe in, to help get you through it. There's nothing that says how you would handle yourself in those times. These prosecutors don't understand that. They would stand here and tell you that that's preposterous. This man was upset. And you're going to see that everything he did from that moment that he found out that his ex-wife had been killed was consistent only with innocence. Absolutely that day. And so Arnell Simpson helps us in that regard. She's followed to the stand by Carmelita Durio. Sister, loves her brother, but you knew that. She was called to talk about Ron Shipp, one of the witnesses in this case that the prosecution called. It's interesting, isn't it?